Hi, how you doing? So we're really busy here at the moment. We're editing like multiple projects, but I've wanted to do this video for a while because I can't stop thinking about it. The whole Dunkey big mode video game publishing when you're a YouTuber thing for the past like couple of months, this whole thing, he's been living rent free in my head, right? Like the whole thing has been fascinating to me because it involves so much of like what we do here at Noclip and just like what my career has always sort of been about or it's been somewhat connected to when I worked at GameSpot and definitely since we started Noclip. So just to rewind a little bit and catch you up, video game YouTuber Dunkey, super popular channel. Last year, I believe it was around September, himself and his wife Leia announced that they were creating a publishing company called Big Mode and that they were on the hunt for, I believe, smaller games, indie games, to publish through this label. At the time, there was a lot of sort of scuttlebutt around it. There's a lot of questions about sort of ethics and, you know, if you're a YouTuber who's basically sort of critiquing games, should you then use your channel to promote games, or will you be funding games from like the start of development and you know, how much input is he going to have or they're going to have in it, all that sort of stuff, right? Just a million and one different questions. And I found it completely fascinating. Let's start with just Dunkey first of all, and sort of like the original trailer that he put up, right? Which was the idea that he, as a sort of a knowledgeable game critic, and he is large, you know, he's one of the most popular YouTube critics, I would say. There's a lot of big video game YouTubers, but he's out there sort of like telling people if games are shitty or good or whatever. You know, that him in that position really gives him an advantage when it comes to making games, right? Now that's at the core of what we've been doing here at Noclip, because I used to have an opinion show on GameSpot, and I would, you know, every week or so make a video about what I thought was going on in the world of video games. And then when I was working at GameSpot, when I moved from Europe to here, to the States, I had access to a lot more developers, and I started talking to developers, and I realized that I knew jack shit. And not just me, that like the majority of people who talk about games, you know, some of my favorite journalists, in many cases, YouTubers, are speaking from a place of sort of naivety. I wouldn't call it ignorance, because I think they don't, well, maybe in some cases, but definitely naivety. And Noclip was basically a reflection of that, which is that I was like, I have this platform where I talk about games and people watch it, and I have some degree of authority, and I know basically jack shit about this. Developers have no platform, at least they've had very little one 6.5 years ago. I should use the sort of platform that I have to give them a platform, and we'll do it by making documentaries and putting them in front of the camera and largely putting me behind the camera, right? Because that's the way that I've come to understand how games are made, right? I'm sitting in this chair. It's a lovely Amazon chair I built myself, but like, I don't know how to make a chair. I can tell you this chair is comfortable. You know, it's like relatively comfortable. It's got back support. I like it. I can tell you that I like this chair. But if you were to tell me to go fucking make a chair, you know, I'll have to, I haven't done a mortise and tenon joint since I was fucking 14 in woodworking class. I wouldn't be able to make you a chair. And games are like incredibly complicated. If you draw a picture of a chair, you might get to that, but games are very different from their sort of birth to when they come out, and there's a whole creative miasma that happens there, and the only way you can really learn it is by doing it, and doing it for years and years and years and years and years. So the idea that somebody who has opinions on games and like can make very popular, very funny videos about them, can make games, struck me as naive. However, if that is part of the sort of, I don't want to say disinformation, or like that it's like sort of cloud cover for the real business that's going on there, then it makes sense. And if I was to put on my business hat over here, I would say the way that Big Mode should operate would be, removing ethics out of the question, I would say the smart business decision to make would be to find games that are largely complete, that are good, that don't have audiences, and to use the channel to get them audiences. Now, ethically, that raises a lot of questions, right? And how you fall on this depends on what you think about what Dunkey is, right? And this is the big thing that I find fascinating, right? As somebody who, you know, I was a big fan at GameSpot when all the Gersman stuff happened back in the day. I then found myself working with a lot of those people. I ended up working at GameSpot. I then, I didn't do any commercial stuff while I was at GameSpot. There was like, I would always have opinions at GameSpot about when we were doing stuff that was, sponsored content or any of that sort of stuff. They kept me out of it, but like I had opinions on it. And now, since starting Noclip, it's about perception again. And the whole Dunkey thing is about perception, right? If you come down on the idea that he is an entertainer, which I largely do, I watched his videos for years and found them really funny. At a certain point, I sort of stopped watching because of the, what I talked about before. Not just him, lots of people. I sort of found it to be, coming from a place of like naivety a bit, some of the opinions on games, and largely I found them quite populist as well, which is something that I like to push back on. The idea that like certain publishers and developers are good and bad, which from interviewing people I think is kind of largely a crock of shit. But they're like sort of narratives that exist in the video games, miasma in Reddit and online. Like we've sort of built this like fake soap opera version of what studios and developers are, and there's some degree of truth in it, but like it's largely bullshit. So I don't like playing to that crowd because I think it's just reinforcing things that are wrong. But he's obviously to a lot of people an entertainer, but he's obviously to a lot of people a critic as well, right? And I think what you will find is, or at least when I look at it, I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think he's an entertainer or a critic. I think it depends not just on the person, but also on the game. If there's a game that is like clearly something he's going to dunk on, then it makes sense that you're kind of watching it more as an entertainment thing. But if he's talking about a game that you like, then really in those situations you want him to be more of a critic. And when you go to, just over the years from like being online, I know that there's a part of I forget what series it is. It's like not Final Fantasy, it's something where like Kingdom Hearts maybe or something. There's like pockets of the Dunkey fandom whenever he like shits on their game that they like, that there's like a cognitive dissonance there of like, but wait, I like him and I trust his opinions, but on this, I'm not so sure about it, right? So anyway, I say all this to make the point that if he's a critic and a journalist, then it's way more problematic, I think, than if he's an entertainer. You know what I mean? Like Willem Dafoe does car commercials. We're okay. That's something that people are somewhat okay with, right? So anyway, that's the first question, or the first point, is that like, what's he going to do? How are they going to utilize it? Let's talk about publishing just for a second, okay? Because publishing is something that I think is largely misunderstood within games in general, and a big part of this is because it is very opaque. Like you don't tend to be in the room when publishing stuff is talked about. Even in our, conversations with developers, a lot of the time those business deals are wrapped up in, loads of legal stuff and they just can't get talked about. However, over the past couple of months, because we've been developing our game Stunt Derby, I've been doing a lot of talking to people about publishing and talking to publishers and talking to people, in the sort of B2B world within games development about this whole thing. So publishing is like such a broad remit. Originally it was gateway to stores, to getting your game in shops. Then it became about getting your game on digital storefronts largely. Knowing the right people, having the right connections within that world to make that stuff happen. As all of that has been largely democratized, publishing has become sort of a bit more savvy maybe. There's a lot more publishers coming in. Publishers are acting a bit more like record labels where they have sort of types of games that they work with. You can kind of pick out like an Annapurna game or a Devolver game or like a New Blood game, right? Although New Blood is kind of like it's hard to tell if they're a publisher or a developer at this stage. But there's or both, right? But what's happened is that like there are different sort of sizes of shoes for different sizes of feet, right? And that's a fucking terrible allegory. So in this case, it seems like the most obvious thing is that he would basically do a quid pro quo on marketing the game, right? That makes the most sense because there's so many parts of publishing that I don't think that he'll get involved in, or they'll get involved in, and it comes from, you just need to have a lot of experience and expertise in these, and you can't go from being a YouTuber, or I'm being he's a businessman, he runs his channel, but you can't go from that to suddenly understanding very complex aspects of production, right? Things like QA, localization, lots of business, lots of legal, lots of finance stuff, Marketing comes in many forms. Obviously, if you have a YouTube channel with millions of subscribers, that's a form of marketing. But there's loads of other types of marketing. There's physical marketing. There's online ad marketing. There's having social media and PR stuff. There's the PR, sort of the other side of the marketing coin, where that's involved in like getting the word out there to game critics, working with influencers, doing influencer marketing, paying people to play the game. All these types of things, going to shows, working with folks at, E3 and PAXs and doing all this sort of stuff, right? It's huge. And some games buy into it more and some less, and it depends on the type of game. If you're making a free-to-play game from a AAA studio, you're going to have this huge sort of infrastructure behind you pushing this game out there, right? If you're a small indie game that's coming out on PC, you could probably get away with just having, a smaller sort of infrastructure that's really pushing people towards wish listing and stuff like that, right? So when I look at Dunkey and I look at Big Mode and I look at the company that they've made, to me, it seems most obviously the way to do this would be that he's not going to be providing a lot of those services, right? Just it doesn't add up to me. Maybe you hire a bunch of people, if you get investment into this thing and you hire a bunch of people who have expertise in that and you build that infrastructure, or maybe you sign one game and that's sort of like the 5-year plan. I don't know. I'm speaking from a place of ignorance. I'm just wondering. This whole video is about wondering because I find it fun to wonder about this thing. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at the end of 2022. 2023, curveball. Because I'm in Los Angeles last week filming at a studio. Thank you to our patrons for allowing us to do our work. And while I'm down there, I get a press release from Big Mode saying that they have signed Animal Well, which is one of my favorite upcoming indie games that I played last year. And it was a game that I made a video of here on Noclip Crew. Or I made a video about when I went to play a bunch of games at Summer Games Fest last year at Jeff Keighley's beach party. And it was the game that I enjoyed the most, and I really liked it, and it really struck me as a game that could easily not find its audience. Like a good game, a really fun game that's doing interesting stuff, but because on the face of it, when you're watching a screenshot of it, or you're not watching it in motion, or you haven't played with it or seen all the smart stuff it's doing, that it could easily fall through the cracks. And I have like a little graveyard in my mind for all the really cool indie games that I played over the years that just for whatever reason never had that sort of launch velocity and never broke into the mainstream and never were hits. And it sucks. It really sucks when you play a really good game that was like you think had a bigger chance and then didn't get it. So when I saw Big Mode, which up to this point I've been quite skeptical. I'm like, this seems like it's ethically dubious, and he's sort of riding the line of, I'm going to be doing more than just marketing these games, and maybe I'll give my input into them, and I'm also kind of an entertainer. I'm not really a critic, or that, he didn't say that, but like that's kind of out there. So I've been like kind of skeptical of this whole fucking thing, right? And then I see that, and I'm like, that's a perfect fit. That's absolutely perfect. And it's perfect if he does the version of this that I think is dubious, which is probably why I'm making this video, because I'm conflicted. Because Animal Well is a game that's like largely complete, or I don't know what stage they're at in development, but from the versions that I've played, it seems that even if it's not like a percentage of it is complete, the developer understands what the game is and is on the finish line to making it. And that's the thing that holds up games a lot of the time is systems aren't really, you don't know what they're supposed to look like. And games often look very different 2 months from launch than they do from launch. Animal Well strikes me as a game where he's got a vision and he knows what it is, right? 2, it's just a really good game. It's a game that like works. I don't think it needs to be fucked with. I've not obviously played all of it, but it seems, I'm confident in the vision, and it doesn't need somebody out from outside to say X or Y or Z. It does not need it. The developer has AAA experience, I believe. He's worked in the industry for a while. I think this is his first indie project, but he knows what the fuck he's doing. He's a smart guy who's making this game, and it seems like it's a sharp thing as well. But the thing that this game needed more than anything else was an audience. It needed to get that knock, that little bump, right? Like Choo Choo Charles last year, where you had a couple of tweets that went viral, and suddenly, there's a bedrock there of Steam wish lists or whatever the fuck it is, of knowledge out there, right? What Animal Well needed was one of those moments, and largely it got it last week when Big Mode announced that they had signed it. So I am very, like, confused by this whole thing. Because I'm like, on one stage, I'm like, this is kind of, okay, I have a problem sometimes with YouTubers who basically make their money off of dunking on games, right? But I've also been a fan of his work, you know. A lot of his videos I really, really like. But that's my personal preference. I'm not making a moral judgment that other people should follow. I don't care. But, like, that's something that I'm dealing with, right? Secondly, I'm always worried about ethics with the work that we do, or the work that anyone does. Before I worked in the industry, it was the thing that I fucking shouted about the most when all the Gerstmann stuff happened on the GameSpot, when I was a GameSpot forum member and I had the most popular user blog on the site. I made a point about talking about it all the time, right? Like, it was really, really, really important to me. When I had my interview for GameSpot UK, the job that I did not get, that then 3.5 years later I got a job, and they asked me what GameSpot could do better. I said they handled the Jeff Gerstmann termination badly. And I said it because I needed to fucking say it, because I needed to know that I would work at a company where I could say that shit. And I don't know if that's what didn't get me the job, but, you know, it probably didn't help. But that's where I'm coming from. Like, I morally give a shit more about the people in positions where they have the fortunate position that I now find myself in, to have an audience and be able to speak to a wide audience about games. They use that with a fundamental sort of understanding of the morals of it, right? So that's why when the stuff was announced, I'm like, all right. It's smart business. It's a clever way to line your pockets. I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with it, right? But I'm really glad they're publishing Animal Well. So I kind of just want to hear from you. What do you think? Like, I've now been in the industry for 10 years. I spent 5 at GameSpot, 6 here, so 11, I guess. Maybe the times have changed. Maybe some of this has shifted. Maybe I'm hitting a vein here that could be exposed a bit more. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's so different with lots of people. Maybe you're watching this and being like, oh, why are you fucking making a big deal of this? Or maybe you're watching it and going like, yeah, there's something here, or, you know, or like, I don't know. I'm very, very interested in what you have to say. And the last thing I'll say about this at all is that, like, and I really don't care about, like, this isn't about internet beef or YouTuber drama. I couldn't give a fuck about any of that stuff. I enjoy my work. I have a family. I have hobbies. I have friends. I don't fucking need any of that shit in my life. But one thing that the one thing I think that I am, like, aligned with Big Mode on, and Dunkey as well, I think, even if there are lots of things that we probably disagree on, or maybe we don't, I don't know fucking know. The one thing that we are definitely aligned on is that you should wishlist Animal Well on Steam. It's very, very good. And I'm not getting paid. This isn't some guerrilla marketing. Imagine if it was. Imagine if this whole thing was just like a ruse, like just amazing guerrilla marketing. I mean, like 5 people are going to watch this, but to promote the game. It's not. And anyway, I'd love, and the funny thing is like, I've been talking to Animal Well about, like, I'd be like, hey, well, it'd be cool if we did a documentary on it when it comes out, and now I'd have to probably go through their publisher. It's just quite funny. So I don't know, maybe like the GameSpot interview, it's good to just have this shit out in the open. I don't know, I've tweeted about it already. But yeah, let me know what you think about this whole thing, if you care or if you have any thoughts about it. And do yourself a favor and go wishlist Animal Well on Steam, because it's a good game. All right, I gotta go back to editing. Bye.